You're listening to Built to Convert, the podcast where growth-minded marketers, founders, and creators come to level up. No hype, no guesswork, just bold insights that drive results. Let's go.
All right, welcome to Built to Convert, the podcast where we explore how strategy, analytics, and creativity come together to drive meaningful growth. I'm your host, Tyler Lane, founder of Session Interactive, and today I'm joined with Mallory Russell, a marketing leader who has built some of the most impactful content strategies in tech, from scaling Square's global content ecosystem to leading integrated marketing initiatives that drive measurable growth. Mallory brings a wealth of insights into how brands can turn storytelling into true growth lever. This episode is brought to you by Session Interactive, the performance marketing agency for brands that are serious about SEO, paid search, and analytics. If your internal teams needs extra horsepower or strategy, or your strategy could use sharper insights, we help B2B, SaaS, and a variety of other industries and focus areas drive meaningful, measurable revenue with less guesswork. Learn more at sessioninteractive.com. All right, I already teed up Mallory a little bit, but I wanted to kind of really set the tone here. Mallory is a strategist, a builder, a storyteller who's spent over 15 years helping build brands and transform their content strategies into more impactful growth engines. Most recently, she has served as a VP of Global Integrated Content Marketing and Strategy at Square, where she has spearheaded full funnel initiatives, scaled editorial excellence, and drove measurable growth across global platforms. Mallory, thanks for jumping on with us. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So, I like to jump in and just establish what you've been up to, in particular at Square. You've been there for a long time thus far, which has been great. And you've had a variety of different roles. Talk to us what you've been up to and how you're continuing to see success at Square.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was at Square for about 8.5 years, which is quite a long time. I started there as an IC. I was the only person doing full-time editorial work. Like a lot of companies, this was shortly after the IPO. It was not the size of company that it is today. The marketing team was much smaller than it is at the moment. There were a lot of people doing little bits and pieces of content. And there was an established content program when I started, but it was mostly taking content and using it in kind of retention efforts, some cross-sell, upsell. There wasn't a real motion around using content to drive acquisition. And that's really what I was brought on to do, is to build out what that looked like as a team of one, working with, an SEO team that existed and a lot of one-person departments at the time. And I grew that role over time, built out the editorial team, added content strategy as a piece of that organization. And then really over the course of about 5 years, built we called it content marketing. It could also be called organic growth or organic marketing, because that's what we focused on. We focused on own channels and organic channels. So it included the content folks, social, database marketing, which we then transitioned into a lead generation team. SEO came into the fold. And then actually over time, we transitioned that from just a team that focused on organic search to one that focused on how you think about organic discoverability across all the channels people are using these days to find information. And then web strategy. So kind of built out this bigger org that worked in a really integrated way, but it was also responsible for channels and worked really closely across the other parts of the marketing funnel with our, brand team, our performance team, our comms team, et cetera. It was a really amazing experience there because there was just so much opportunity. And I do like to build and learn new things. And there was a lot of places to do that. I left in March and have been taking a little bit of time because I moved and I have small kids. And kind of thinking about what the next step is. But I am a content person to my core, no matter what else I'm doing.
I love how you frame that, just the individuals on your team at the time around SEO in particular, right? I'm selfishly dwelling on that, but I think it's interesting just as the advent of LLMs and other things too, and just how people are remixing across search and social and LLMs, and how you're positioning that individual or team that was less about SEO. It was more about like just organic discoverability as a whole.
Yeah, well, there was a moment. So kind of during my time at Square, one of the first things I did with the SEO team when I got to Square was really kind of help build that channel through content.
Yep.
And we went from relying on a very small percentage of our traffic coming in from organic search to more than half, like within the first year. So we were really dependent on organic search, and that was great for a few years. And then it started to make me feel a little uncomfortable, like because you are at the whim of this, entity that's changing the algorithm, and you're not getting a heads up about that. I just felt like we needed to diversify, like you would with like a portfolio, right? You're just like too invested in one stock. You need to diversify, and so this was really before ChatGPT kind of exploded on the scene and people started thinking about LLMs in a different way. But at the time, it was like TikTok was the big thing. Is everyone's like, oh, a younger generation is using TikTok like a search engine. I happen to manage both the social team and the SEO team, and so the thought there was, well, why aren't we using the skill set of this SEO team and combining it with the skill set of the social team, like we have been doing with, our editorial folks and our SEO folks.
Smart. Yeah.
Start to test things out. That actually, the partnership between social and organic discoverability, like really evolved, because then you have YouTube, Instagram then is, pulling in from Gemini at this point. We have them working on Reddit, Amazon, like there's so many channels out there. I think the best part about it, though, was like it put the team in this headspace where they were trying out these new channels, testing things, like trying to uncover what those algorithms looked like. Mm-hmm. And so they were already in this kind of experimental mindset where they weren't afraid to take risk. And we had created space in the goals that they have to accommodate that. So by the time AI and LLMs really start entering the equation, like they're already in that state of mind to like go and start building out a test plan for it.
Was that difficult because there's so many lanes, there's so many, it's like, what do I truly own?
Yeah.
Like, is that difficult in a sense? Because the social team's like, oh, I clearly have just been fixating on organic and maybe some paid entities as well, certain things with paid social. And as the SEO is like, I own the website, the content strategy, those components, but now I'm like, wow, I'm tasked with all this. So yeah, I'm curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, that is really difficult. I think it was, particularly in the early stages, I didn't want every SEO on our team to feel overwhelmed by how many places and opportunities there were. So we did have like a person on the team that was really kind of driving experimentation in new channels and sharing out learnings. And we also operated at the time with a lot of people who were focused on kind of regions. And so they were doing some experimentation too, based on the marketing strategy they were kind of feeding into. And so we didn't do everything all at once. Mm-hmm. We prioritized what spaces we thought we were going to get the most lift out of based on our audience and our marketing plans. And then we did a lot of like testing and learning and sharing out. I think the other part of this is that even before we started making all these changes, like we had all of these teams that I managed that they had goals that were like unto themselves. And so I had to do a lot of work with the leads across who reported into me to figure out how we could integrate as a group and really build strategy and programs together. So there were shared goals. And it wasn't like, oh, I have these things that I have to accomplish. I can't work with you on this thing because that's for you. Like there had to be more just accountability across the team. Sure. And so that work had been happening for a long time before we kind of even got into this space, which I don't think it would have worked otherwise. No. Because it would have just been like an extra thing for someone to work on.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel that way because we had kind of built these ways of working together already.
Yeah, that cross-channel collaboration is key. I think a lot of people talk about it. Less people actually are able to execute on it. So
I mean, it's hard.
It's incredibly difficult.
Really hard.
Well, I think that's too is, being in the agency position that we're in, let's say we'll have a channel line item within a scope, like you're managing SEO, you're managing paid media or analytics or a combination of some. And it's like, we're so fixated on that.
Mm-hmm.
And we know there's so many other influential factors, but we're limited with our scope.
Yeah.
And our bandwidth. And then the clients heads down on a lot of internal deliverables. So it's difficult to try to keep it rolling. So we, try to obviously spur additional ideation through QBRs and other things like that. But
totally.
Yeah, it's tough. So good. That's impressive. You're able to do that. Let's talk, your experience with change.org, obviously Square 2, you got a mission driven company versus more high growth companies. Talk to me how that kind of changed your perspective on building content strategies.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, actually, because I started my career in advertising. Mm-hmm. I worked across a large variety of brands, both B2C and B2B. Became a reporter for a little while.
Yeah, that's journalism.
And that's really like actually how I found content marketing is I loved the strategy that I had done agency side, like loved it. I just like my brain loves the puzzles that kind of strategy enables you to work on. Mm. And then, but I also really love to create. And so I was doing a lot of writing and like working on, special issues and I love that part of it. And then content marketing is how I put the two together. And I happened to kind of get to a point in my career at the same time where content marketing was becoming its own function. So I feel like the timing, I was really lucky in the timing. My first content marketing role was at a startup, a video startup that catered really to Fortune 50 brands. And I'd been working in this kind of large corporation ad space for a really long time. And I was feeling like they needed a bit of a change. And that's when I found change.org, which was so different, right? It's not a nonprofit. It was a B Corp. But it was B2C and I, wasn't selling a specific product. I was trying to get people to use this platform to elevate their voices. And the mission was very, very important to working there, right? Like you really had to understand it and you built around it. This idea of democratizing the internet. And for me, the thing that woke up in my brain was like what that did to the people inside the company and the way they worked. It was so different than other places I'd worked because everyone wasn't just revolving around a number or a goal or a revenue, a dollar sign, which was important. But there was also this other thing that people were working towards, this kind of like higher mission that really broke up a lot of gridlock. It was easier to make decisions if the decision didn't also support that mission. We just, you didn't do it. It was like a very different way to work that I really liked. And when I found Square, yes, in a very high growth moment, but actually also had that same ethos, this idea of opening up the economy to people and empowering people to take part in it in a way that they hadn't been able to before. Because people don't remember this now, maybe. There was a time when like you didn't get to use credit cards most places. And that's because it was really difficult to get, one of those, terminals. Mm-hmm. And Square was really the disruptor in the space that allowed people to just, have that thing on their phone and take a credit card. They do so much more now. But so when I found the opening on Square and then I learned so much more about that, I was like, okay, this is an interesting place for me to go in because it is that kind of high growth tech company, but it has this mission again that people are thinking about. And it is something that was talked about really regularly and became very, very important in moments like the pandemic when it just helped clarify what we really actually needed to do to continue to support customers in the way that we wanted to, which was allowing them to stay open. And everyone felt really aligned and saw importance in that. So it just changes the way you work a little bit. That I love that.
There's a lesson, right? That underlying like ethos comment you made around, revenues, obviously the essential metric, margin, of course. But at the end of the day, it's like the mission is going to supersede other things, and hopefully make the decision making a little bit clearer, right?
For sure. And I think for a person like me who does the kind of marketing that I do, content marketing, organic marketing, you can't do that well unless you are intently focused on your consumer and they what they are interested in, what they need, what they want is like the first thing you're thinking about. And I think that is really aligned with these kind of mission-driven organizations that are putting the mindset of that person and the needs of that person really front and center and saying, yes, we need to hit these business goals, but also there's this person that we're trying to aid and assist. And I think that is so critical for doing great content work, because a lot of companies don't. Yes, they think about the customer, but what they're thinking about is how they get their message in front of that person, not what message does this person actually want to receive, and how do we fit our brand into that? What authority do we have to speak to it? It's just a kind of a slight shift in thinking and working.
Well, just, I mean, the human element too, and I'm not, diminishing your role by any means, but I'm sure that would just makes things a little bit easier.
Yes.
Just being like, hey,
100%.
Versus being all so fixated on leads and conversion components, which you're obsessed with, of course.
Of course. Yeah. But the like understanding who it is you're actually, all of that is in service of at the end of the day. It just helps make the work better, I think.
Mallory, let's transition here. I don't know if you've heard this acronym or not. AI. God, I got to stop. My jokes are getting terrible. But listen, Gen AI been around for a few years now. Definitely been around for a lot longer. But in terms of widespread adoption, let's say 3 years ish, right? And becoming more and more ubiquitous. That said, it's still used by a subset of individuals, despite what your LinkedIn feed says, mine in particular, everyone, it's so intense. I gave a talk the other day at a conference around the kind of the sea of sameness, right? Around this pre-Gen AI versus post-Gen AI. Pre, it was terrible content, mediocre, and then excellent content. And this is, not necessarily all of my data by any means. And then post-Gen AI, there's less terrible content, but a sea of mediocre content still. As people are thinking that they're copywriters now. How did you deal with? I'm not saying you got this by any means, but like, we can scale content now so much faster. A couple of prompts were there. Talk to me about how you dealt with that and how you ultimately utilize and continue perhaps utilize AI as a strategic partner. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a content person out there that didn't get that response, but particularly when ChatGPT like kind of exploded on the scene. Is we can use this to scale, because within an organization, a content team is always smaller than the needs of content. And so that is always going to be, that was naturally, people's first response is you can use this to scale what you're doing in a really effective way. My response immediately, because I got a lot of people would like send me stuff that they'd written through it, and I was like, thanks, but no, we're not going to publish this. I think the first thing I did is say, let me just take a beat, like a week, to really think about this and how we want to use this in a really strategic way, because I don't think the opportunity is to create more content. But there is an opportunity there, or not in the way people were telling me I needed to use it. And I have said this for years and years. I just generally think there's too much content in the world. And a lot of it isn't necessarily of value, right? And so part of my job as a person who runs a content organization is to make sure that we are producing content that drives the business goals that we have. That I'm like a steward of my budget, that I'm using my budget really effectively to produce content that is actually impactful. And I mean that both from the business standpoint and from the customer standpoint, that's something that's really useful to them. So what I came back with was, and this is still kind of the way I think about it, which is AI it is a really effective set of tools, right? It's not the strategy. It's a set of tools. It's a partner you can use for your content strategy. The first part that I think it's so helpful with is content management. It's probably one of the least talked about parts of running a content organization, which is like Square had a very large library of content because they had a very well-established program. We're talking thousands of pieces. Most people who don't do content or SEO don't know that like once you've published something, you're not just leaving it. Like you're going back to it on a regular basis to make sure it's performant. You can't just let it sit there. So content management of a library that big is really a full-time job. And it's actually usually the stuff that is driving the majority of your performance. There are things that I wrote like 7 years ago at Square that are still driving, large amounts of revenue into the company, I'm sure.
Sure.
So using those tools to kind of help optimize that library, manage it, understand where there's opportunity, not even just from like a search perspective, but even like engagement on the page to make that more effective, I think is one use case that we really keyed in on first. Another is verticalization, or personalization, like taking a piece of content and then making it useful for kind of maybe different personas, or in the case of Square, like different kinds of industries we were talking to. And then the third is atomization. So time consuming. I mean, as a single content marketer on a team, I would often be writing like a report that then turned into 10 articles and 25 social posts and 15 emails, and you're writing all of that. And often it's actually the same kind of content repeated in different ways. So again, these tools are great for that kind of thing, at least starting, and then you can have someone edit it. Just cuts down the time dramatically. So you have that kind of whole management optimization category. I think the second part that I really keyed in on was like how you use AI tools to show what other people are doing so you can find the open space. To your point, LLMs are ingesting what everyone is doing, and then that's how they build what they give you. So you don't want to take content straight from your LLM because it's just going to be what everyone else has. To your point, it's a larger sea of mediocre content. Why spend time doing that when you could understand what your competitive set is doing, whether that's product competitors or even just like competitors for attention, which is how content people have to think about this. And then see where people aren't creating content yet, right? Or maybe where there's a topic that they are creating content, but they're all taking the same exact approach to it. And how do we do something completely opposite? So I think as like a research tool to help build strategy, it's incredibly effective and useful. Again, especially since most content teams are very, very small.
Exactly.
And aren't fully resourced for the most part. And then the third part, obviously, is like how you use this as an acquisition channel or, a discoverability channel, which I think is so fascinating and really exciting in my point of view for content people, because it elevates a lot of strategies that have always been there. But I guess over the last 10 years, there was a lot of emphasis put on the kind of content that really directly drives the conversion point, and the things that are really important for, or at top of funnel, you're doing kind of your old school SEO playbook. With LLMs, you're using things like thought leadership, which had been kind of relegated maybe to kind of a comm space in some cases, or brand, and they're incredibly important for discoverability. We've always known that they're important for SEO and all of that, but you just have this other channel now where it is the only way to get recognized is to have citations, right? To have things that are unique that can be quoted and pulled from. So data becomes super important again. Unique voices, spokespeople, and using all of that in content. And so that's another place. And then also the kind of traffic that comes from that is very different than it is when you're doing kind of organic search in many cases. So there's a lot to dig into there too. So there's kind of the three areas that we outlined and started thinking about. The acquisition one came a little bit later because it wasn't clear yet that people were going to adopt at such a rate where you needed like what that full strategy should look like. But for sure, right out the gate, the kind of optimization piece and then the strategic kind of research piece of it.
Let's just say you've got a little bit of perspective here. It's awesome to hear being able to break down, because definitely it's spot on just into the management component to be able to utilize AI tools to
oh my gosh,
expedite data and insights. I mean, the content audit process is already time consuming, right?
Yes.
With a library of thousands of pieces. And you're absolutely, it's the age old concept of regenerating existing content. I mean, it still works. It's like set it and forget it is not, when was that ever a thing, right? And it's like,
for sure.
You wrote that article, what, number of years ago, refreshing it, regenerating in certain capacities, it can really double down and continue to improve results.
Yeah. And if you have a good content strategy too, like you should be able to repackage work that you've done several years ago on an ongoing basis. And it saves you so much time and money. Again, like you do have to be a good steward for your budget because there's often more need than there is resource. And it's just something that I think content people know, and they know it's part of the job, but like it isn't maybe discussed as often. It's always about like what new stuff are you creating? And there's so much value in that library.
Talk a little bit more about, let's say you're dealing with, let's say a client or a brand that you're working with, for example, and maybe a limited budget, and you're outlining a strategy, and it's you need to think about thought leadership content, but you're also under the gun to a certain extent around performance related. How as KPIs have shifted slightly, attributions become more difficult, especially with LLMs and others. How are you talking with the higher ups to educate them and saying like, hey, this is kind of the ecosystem, and this is what you have to do to remain relevant, not just decision-based content, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. It's that like a lot of marketing teams, it's where do you look at something from kind of a longer term view and a shorter term view, and both are very important. And how do you decide what to invest in? Mm-hmm. My point of view on thought leadership is that, and actually any kind of content program that you're putting together, it should be full funnel. Mm-hmm. Like that isn't often the case because, and this goes back, and we probably spend a lot of time talking about this, but like organizationally, content is usually sits under brand or under performance, or maybe the production of content actually sits in multiple places. And so you're actually carving up pieces of the funnel and creating content for that, but maybe not always thinking about it as a full strategy. But content should really be thought of from top to bottom. And so when you're doing a thought leadership program, let's say, you do like an annual report that's based on first party data, you should actually, in the process of building that, be building assets that support every part of the funnel and the full marketing plan that you have across every part of the team. And that is one way that it helps to have these conversations. It's saying not only are we going to spend time in this, yes, it's going to create, a top of funnel discoverability. You're going to get people into the website, but we're actually going to build a customer journey that moves them from top to bottom of funnel through that content. So at Square, for instance, we have, for the last 5 years, we did a tentpole report called The Future of Commerce. It was a report that we did through surveys of customers and small businesses. We married that data. We evolved this over time. It started as a pilot. It went fully, global at one point, but we had these reports. We used a lot of the data in pitching press. There, you got your kind of top of funnel piece. We'd also use the data points to write a lot of articles that were generating a ton of keywords. So we're generating backlinks. We're capturing, a lot of search terms. It was used in, integrated marketing campaigns, again, more kind of top of funnel awareness measurements that drove into the website. and our content hub where you could actually like download. Again, now you're hitting like the middle of funnel. And we not only had the data in there, but we had customers that we'd interviewed. We could then pull those out into case studies. You see what I'm saying? Like you just start creating one asset and building out pieces of it that can be used as you pull people all the way down. We had, custom nurture flows from the email capture that used the case studies and other parts of content. So I think that's the way you have to think about a thought leadership program. It's not just the individual asset. You're creating a journey for the customer, and a set of content that speak to an idea versus thinking kind of asset first. I'm creating a report. I'm creating this program and this idea that's going to communicate a message. And then we're going to have, yes, a series of assets that support the funnel and are distributed appropriately.
It's wild how teams still fixate on asset first.
Yes.
Versus the theme and really conducting expanded research around where people are digesting and what type of content resonates, but more so around the concept first.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the most common thing that I would hear, and that I like when I talk to people now that I'm still hearing is it is really, they're thinking about the blog posts, the report, the social content, whatever, as opposed to thinking about like, what is the message you're trying to communicate? What kind of topics can you have authority in and can you create conversation around? And then like moving from there, the content is literally that assets, but you need that whole program built around it. The strategy has to exist. The methods of distribution have to be actually not an afterthought, but like a core component of actually building the strategy and the assets themselves too. So, but it's still really common not to think that way.
It is.
And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the size of content teams. If there isn't even a content team, sometimes it's an individual person. And oftentimes they're more junior, sitting within a team that like doesn't have like a senior level kind of content strategist on it. And so that is naturally the way you would go into it. It's asset first versus strategy first.
Mallory, how do you deal with you kind of alluded to it a couple of times, but just around the shiny object, right? Yeah. Our insatiable appetite as humans to just create new, right?
Sure.
Is there, let's say, a scenario where you could be like, we're good for now. We don't need to create it. Let's really distribute the hell and diversify the hell out of this existing content, regenerate it versus the net new. How do you deal with the team, or especially maybe like higher level executives that are just like want to see what you've accomplished in terms of the new perspective, the trend, the opinion, versus you stating like, we need to focus on what we already have.
Yeah.
You talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard, especially with content, because content's a lot of fun and there's so much fun stuff you can do with it. And everyone has ideas that are really like, ideas for content can come from anywhere. Sometimes it's coming from a creative team, sometimes from your product teams. There's just so many ideas. So like understanding what to say yes and no to, I think is a really hard part of the job. And then, there are these things that kind of erupt and everyone gets really excited about that, whether it's like a new channel or a new format that everyone's hot on. And you have to know when to say yes and when to say no. A great example of this at Square was, I think even like my first week starting there were discussions about creating a podcast. And one part of the org wanted to do a podcast about A, another part wanted to do about B. Like none of it actually made sense yet because it was being thought of like so strictly to serve one team's goal or another. And so for a long time, people kept coming and saying, we should do this podcast. And I kept saying no. And it wasn't because I didn't want to do a podcast. I actually saw a huge value in it. I just didn't think we had come up with a concept and an idea that could be flexible enough across all of the channels where I thought it needed to be distributed to be effective and successful. And people didn't like that. People didn't like that, but I felt really strongly about it. And I had a lot of conversations with leadership about how podcasts were useful and where they had value and what we needed to be looking for. I also, had created a strategy and had goals that were very clearly communicated and aligned with leadership on,
Sure.
Which again makes it easier to push back on things, to say like, this does not fit in with what we've outlined yet, and so by the time that it actually was the moment to do it, I also had a lot of credibility because I had said no to so many other ideas, even when maybe the concept was really great, but we actually it didn't fit into any way we could distribute it. By the time we found something that worked, I was coming with, here's the idea, here's where we can distribute it, here's why it works to support the messaging we have at the moment, here's how it can be flexible, not just right now, but throughout the entire year. People were like, and I was like, yes, it's a bit of a risk because we've never done this before, and here's the things I'm going to keep an eye on and we should be learning. But people were at that point like, yeah, let's do it. They were on board because there had been a lot of years of discussion around it. I think again, it's just saying no to the shiny objects. If you're going to do it, it has to be backed in something. It has to be this. It can't just be an instinct. It has to be the strategy. It has to be the data you have. And if you have put those things together up front and really gotten people aligned and share those out and people understand it, I think it becomes easier to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's always tough because you could probably make the argument. I mean, good on you to push back, right? Because I think we're on a podcast right now, but it's just the multitude of uses from this is amazing.
Yes.
That said, you already had one or two things going on, so let's keep the team focused. Mallory, kind of some foreshadowing questions here. Where do you put you on the spot here? Biggest opportunities for integrated content strategy over the next 3 to 5 years. Obviously, we talked about AI. We talked about remixing across social and LLMs and search. We talked about content diversification and content distribution. What are your thoughts? Some age-old concepts that will continue to move forward, or are there some new things that you're thinking of?
There are a few things. I mean, one, it is, I think the surge in AI usage, which I think will continue to grow, although, other channels are still very, very important. I think it does demonstrate the importance of brand and messaging and just how integral a content team is to that work. And so I think the idea of messaging and content strategy becomes really more critical than it's been before. And you can actually see this starting to play out in the market. If you look at roles out there, a lot of them are asking for content strategists, not necessarily editors or writers or content marketers. They want someone who's actually going to think about how the message becomes the thing out in the wild and work with the teams who are doing research and messaging work. So I think that's a really critical piece of all of this. Distribution, I think, is probably one of the most interesting changes that I've seen over the past few years. And obviously AI is included in that, but even taking that out of it, the LLMs out of it, it's just, I mean, we all know this because we're consumers ourselves. Think about the number of channels you go to and media you consume any day of the week. And most of them aren't mass media, right? Influencers and creators are now media channels, right? And so I think content people have to think about not just the way you're distributing, but even how you're creating and who you're creating with in a different way. I think partnerships and content become even more critical than they have been. Not just thinking about how an influencer can take your message and create content on their channels, but how are you using those people on your channels? And how are you building maybe unique experiences with them? I just think the distribution piece of content is infinitely more complicated than it used to be. I also think like leading into the third part, which is measurement. With AI, with the changes to Google, which for years, content marketing has been so reliant on search to drive results, just a complete reset in your brain of what success actually looks like. Because it's not traffic, right? It never really was, but that is the way people measured success with content, is how many eyeballs are you getting on it? And now it's going to be fewer, but that's not a bad thing, because most likely if you're actually getting someone into your own site to view content or your website, they are qualified and they are potentially really ready to convert. And so I think there's just a real change in how people have to think about content success, content metrics, and really starting, again, because you are distributing it in so many more channels now. You're maybe working in partnerships, which are more difficult to track. Also, kind of putting new emphasis on what content actually does, which is it engages people and it shifts perceptions. It changes the way people think and it engages them, and like actually measuring content on that and how it impacts the rest of your marketing, I think hopefully is the way more people are going to move, as opposed to, looking at it as a single touch in a very linear kind of journey. It's not. It's, consumers are not rational and they don't take journeys in a rational way. And so I think the more you can think about content and the real value it provides, which is engagement, the better you'll be able to use it.
I love just the KPI evolution. It is just still this that uphill battle, right? With executives, others are like, why didn't this convert? It's like, well, how did you, give your example? How would you digest? Where would you, information that are going to sway your opinion one way or another? Talk to me about your process, and it's going to be like 10, 15 touch points before. So,
exactly.
Attribution remains difficult, but I think the evolution around KPIs and making sure you're shifting that. I love how you're mentioning the diversification and distribution of content. These are not new concepts, but it still is things that work well, and hammer it. And again, it's daunting, right? Too, I think for mid-market too, for smaller brands that are just like, I'm overwhelmed. Right. For
sure. I mean, that is the other part of this, is that there's so much happening at once. It's like, how do we do all of that? Particularly if you're like a one-person show, like you actually can't. So you just have to pick. Prioritization is always the most important thing, right? You have to pick the places, you have to make some bets on what you think is going to be really impactful, or what you can learn really quickly, so you can build to something impactful. Because not everything you test and learn on is going to have a huge impact. But if you can do it quickly and you can ladder up a bunch of those little wins or maybe learnings, you'll have big impact in a short order.
I agree. Mallory, absolute pleasure chatting with you, and your perspective is invaluable, and clearly you bring the heat in terms of your background and your credibility. So really appreciate your time. Where can people engage with you since you've left Square? You're taking some time. Any plans for the future, or any roles you're looking at? Talk to us.
Yeah, I'm looking at a few roles. We'll see. Also looking at some kind of contract work
for you,
because it's just really interesting to learn about a lot of different kinds of brands and the business challenges they have, and different kinds of customers and the way they think about the world. It's fun. Like, I really like to learn. So I love just talking to people and hearing what they have to say and what problems they have at the moment. I'm on LinkedIn, Mallory A. Russell. I'm speaking at a conference next month in Denver, Martech Next, hosted by Progress. And I'm on some podcasts here and there.
Yes, let's go. I love it. Yeah. Mallory, thanks again. We'll be in touch. Appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your week.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Built to Convert. If you're serious about growth, don't just listen. Subscribe, leave a review, and follow us for new episodes that drop straight into your feed. Until next time, keep building.